What's really unique about this period in history is that the people who want to go to the moon aren't doing it for the money. Yes, they want to make money, but they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it out of love for space exploration. They're doing it out of love for Apollo or for Star Trek or Star Wars. I don't care, but they're not, the people in it right now are not that first trillionaire that Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about, right?
Hey, SpaceWatchers, this is Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, awesome events, and interesting people in the space sector. In June 2024, I had the opportunity to attend the first UN Conference on Sustainable Lunar Activities, followed by the 67th session of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space in Vienna. During the event, I spoke with Michelle Hanlon, the co-founder of For All Moonkind, a non-profit organization that seeks to protect each of the human lunar landing and similar sites in outer space as part of our common human heritage. How they try to protect these sites? Why it is that difficult? That I discussed with Michelle in a very busy coffee shop at the UN. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. Lean back and enjoy this episode. Welcome to another episode of our Space Café Radio. And I have the great pleasure and honor to sit together with Michelle Hanlon, the co-founder and president and chief executive officer of For All Moonkind. Michelle, welcome, and how are you doing?
Oh, hi, Thorsten. Thank you so much for having me back. It's been a while. I'm doing great. This has been a really interesting week in Vienna.
As our audience is growing, what can you tell us about For All Moonkind? What it is, just to start with.
Absolutely. So For All Moonkind is the only organization in the world focused on protecting cultural heritage in outer space. So people look at me funny when I say that. Think about the Apollo lunar landing sites, but it's not just Apollo. Think also about the Luna sites that the Soviet Union set up. There's Luna 2, the first object ever to impact another celestial body. Luna 9, the first human-made object to take pictures of the moon from the surface of the moon. Chang'e 4, first human-made object to land on the far side of the moon. And Chandrayaan 3, first to land on the lunar South Pole. These are really incredible achievements. And the sad thing is what people don't realize is they're not protected at all. When we think about artifacts on Earth, you think about the pyramids of Egypt or the Great Wall of China. Those are protected and revered, and you're not allowed to mess things up. You can do anything you want to any of those sites where these objects are found right now. And we're working hard to protect them for all of humanity.
Why is that? Why are the pyramids, if we want to stay with them, or even a number of sites here in Vienna, why are they protected by UNESCO and not something on the moon?
So it's a very interesting question from a law standpoint. I don't want to go too much into the weeds, but I think everyone will agree. Fundamental premise of the Outer Space Treaty is the freedom of exploration and use. You have free access to all areas of celestial bodies. So when you want to safeguard something or want to protect something, you're immediately stopping people from doing that. So it's a violation of the fundamental precept of the Outer Space Treaty, which is the only law we have in space. And so how do we break that conundrum? We have this concept also in the Outer Space Treaty called due regard. And so we believe at For All Moonkind, we can use this concept of due regard to say, hey, have some due regard for history. We do that as just common sense, common responsibilities, be considerate of history, and let's work together to safeguard it.
If I rephrase it, your goal is to safeguard the human heritage in space or on the moon. But we touched, I think, a bit on it, but why is that so hard at the end? The more experienced audience might have seen Apollo flying and landing or any of the newest achievements there with the current moon missions. So we have seen that, and it would be clear to say, yes, that's heritage, that's cool. So why isn't that translating into a reality?
Thorsten, this is a question that we face all the time right here in Vienna. There's not one delegate at the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space who has said to me that this is a bad idea or a dumb idea. Everyone universally agrees, yeah, we should protect heritage, but it's hard. How are we going to do it? And again, because you are literally saying, okay, we're going to seal off this area. You can't go back there, and that violates the Outer Space Treaty. And then you have the compounding issue, right? Who decides what should be safeguarded? Should Apollo 17, Apollo 11, what about the surveyors? Or what about all the Chandrayans, all of the Lunas? Do we need to protect everything that's on the moon? There are more than 115 sites on the moon that have evidence of human activity. All of a sudden, you look at somebody wants to mine the moon and they're saying, if you're going to protect 115 sites, what's left for me? Right now, that's not so much an issue because most of the sites are not anywhere near where we think the water ice is. But also think about what I like to talk about the Soviet Union. We were in the middle of the space race and the Soviet Union made it first into space with Sputnik. And President Eisenhower said, well done, Soviet Union. We're not going to object to the fact that you flew over. And the Soviet Union said, oh, wait, no, we're not. We don't want space to be free for everybody. They didn't mean to cause that reaction. But it was set in stone. It was decided that space would be free for exploration use by all. So what did the Soviet Union do next? They had the next couple wins in space, right? They sent Luna 2 to the moon, and it had on it a sphere made of all these medallions.
Yeah.
And the whole intent of this was for the medallions to explode. Why? Obviously, if you have a wide perimeter, then you have some sort of claim over it, right? And there's no other reason to have that expansion. And so there is also a concern that anytime someone sends something to the moon, they'll say, oh, this is heritage, safeguard it, nobody can come here.
Exactly, that would be my question. So if I'm referring back to my time with PT Scientists, if we had sent our first rover to the moon, for us that would be heritage. But I think we could learn from UNESCO or these organizations that are doing that on Earth, how to judge something as a heritage. Is that correct?
Exactly. This is exactly what we have to do. And it's not just heritage. We need to think about sites of scientific importance, sites of astronomical importance. We need to get some sort of infrastructure in place where we can start deciding, let's not do it the way we have ravaged our Earth. And a lot of people complain about colonialism and we were barbaric to our environment. We've learned a lot of lessons. We can do this. We actually have a little bit of time to try and figure this out. And again, maybe people aren't going to agree if some place is important for scientific reasons or for astronomical reasons. Maybe there'll be a clash between commercial development. But when it comes to how many people on Earth would be happy to see a company move the Apollo 11 lunar landing site or move the Luna 9 landing site so that they could mine there. These are areas where we can build consensus and we can build agreement. And this is how we can start creating sort of an adaptive and flexible framework for making decisions about what sites we can exploit.
Where do we stand today, or where do you stand with the initiative?
We have made a ton. I will say, and I'm going to step back, and I was a business attorney for 25 years. And so back then, I made deals in 6 to 9 months. And I thought for sure that's all it would take to get a treaty. But no, so we wrote and helped push through the first national legislation ever to recognize that there is human heritage in outer space. In the United States, it's the One Small Step Act. We advocated very strongly here and in the United States, and the people who drafted, who were the architects of the Artemis Accords, will tell you that Section 9, which talks about protecting and safeguarding heritage, is in there because of the activities of our organization For All Moonkind. And that is the first multinational agreement to formally recognize that we have heritage in outer space. Now, 43 nations are parties to it. So 43 countries say, oh, wow, you're right, there is heritage in outer space. Here at the UN, we're seeing more and more delegates saying things like Canada last year said maybe the LTS guidelines ought to think about lunar environments and protecting heritage. We have the delegates from Romania saying we want to create an infrastructure that, among other things, considers how to protect heritage. So we're in the conversation. And so maybe to most listeners, being in the conversation is, wow, in 6 years, that's all you got? It's huge in this particular environment.
Just to remind our listeners, if you just address them, it's the negotiation of the LTS, the long-term sustainability guidelines for the behavior in outer space, took just 10 years to come to adaptation here at the UN. And that's, I think, 7 years ago, something like that. And we are still lagging implementation of it in wide scale. So I think the time frame you just mentioned is okay. You have suggested that protecting heritage can maintain space for peaceful purposes. Can you explain that a bit to me?
Absolutely. So when we talk about protecting cultural heritage, when you look back to why we started doing this, it started in the 1960s and 50s in Egypt, where they needed to build a dam because they needed to control the Nile River in order to develop. But when they built that dam, they knew that they were going to ruin the Nubia Valley, which had temples which are considered the cradle of human civilization. And so Egypt turned to the international community and said, what should we do? And you know what? The international community didn't say, you can't build because you're going to ruin these artifacts. They said, oh, let us help you. And nations came together and they worked together, contributed money to move the temples out of the path of the Nile River piece by piece. And out of that came the UNESCO World Heritage Convention and the statement by Russell Train, who's considered the father of World Heritage, who said, recognizing heritage recognizes the kinship. Every achievement on Earth is a human achievement. And seeing that and celebrating that is how we build kinship amongst each other. And what we've seen with the UN system is more and more recognition of that. We have entire treaties about protecting cultural heritage at times of war and times of conflict, because we understand that is how we're going to rebuild societies, and that's how societies come together. Everybody wants to see the Great Wall of China. Everybody wants to see the Liberty Bell. These are all things that we've done together. So when we think about creating or protecting heritage in space, we're trying to capture that kinship, and perhaps that will help us then move more into space and into more with more peaceful ideas than exploitation or competition. But from a much more practical matter, there's an issue on the moon called the plume effect. The regolith is very sharp. So if you imagine driving down a dirt road and all that dust kicks up, the dust on the moon has electric properties and it's very rough. They're very sharp. And so if you go too close to somebody with an operational machine or spacecraft, you're going to ruin it. And so we are going to need safety zones. We are going to need rules about how close you get to somebody else. Let's start those rules with heritage sites. Let's say we're not going to be able to agree on how far we should stay from the Chinese or that commercial company, but we can agree, let's stay this far away from Apollo or Chang'e, and then we can build from there a framework peacefully for safety zones based on inclusion and conservation and not exploitation and exclusion.
How can a safety zone argued legally?
So we have a concept in the Outer Space Treaty in Article 9 called due regard. And this is really what our generation needs to figure out, how to make due regard into a code of conduct. And yes, you need to stay this far away from me because you will be complying with your due regard obligations under the Outer Space Treaty.
When I listen to you, and I'm fully agree, and I'm buying into this concept, but we don't have today a space economy that is predicted multi-billion, not there, not on the moon right now. So how urgent is this issue? Because I think with the appearance of a space economy, of commercial companies coming there, producing stuff, I think then it's too late to start the conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. Right now, our history is our most valuable and most vulnerable resource on the moon. No, we're not going to have a thriving lunar economy in the next decade, maybe not in my lifetime. But what we're seeing are more and more people going back to the moon. And there are no rules at all whatsoever. You can send anything you want to the moon. You can crash something in the moon. And these are the kinds of things we really need to address. We want to do it through the lens of heritage.
Do you think that the commercial companies will jump on it as well and say, okay, yeah, we are with you? Are they respecting that, or is they saying, we don't care?
Torsten, what's really unique about this period in history is that the people who want to go to the moon aren't doing it for the money. Yes, they want to make money, but they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it out of love for space exploration. They're doing it out of love for Apollo or for Star Trek or Star Wars. I don't care, but they're not, the people in it right now are not that first trillionaire that Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about, right? So this is the perfect time to get everybody together because there is a deep respect for what Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin did. There is a deep respect for how many commercial missions didn't quite make it successfully to the moon. It's hard. So all of the other missions that have, that's really special. And I think commercial entities themselves recognize that. I'm going to be completely upfront and honest. I have not talked to anybody officially from Blue or officially from SpaceX. There are people there that agree with me and our organization, but most of the startups that we have seen in the past decade, PT Scientists, Intuitive Machines, they are all on board.
I think our audience is now absolute catch and say, okay, how can we help? How can we get engaged? How can they?
I would love for you to contact me, Michelle at forallmoonkind.org. What we really want to do is start a grassroots movement in every single country. We have a new program. I want you to become an ambassador for All Moonkind. You get a T-shirt and you walk around space conferences and you talk about how important it is to protect heritage in outer space and how that is how we will build a lunar framework that works for everybody, and that is how we will keep the peace in space and bring peace to Earth.
So, SpaceWatchers, you heard it, you get your T-shirt and then you become an ambassador and you can walk around space conferences. How couldn't that be appealing for you? No, but honestly, we will put the link to For All Moonkind in the show notes and of course the email address how to reach Michelle. And let us know what your experience is and what your thoughts are. We would like to hear your opinion as well. Michelle, thank you very much for your time and good luck here at the UN and good luck especially for All Moonkind.
Torsten, thank you. It's such a treat to see you again in person. Really appreciate it.
If you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Torsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.